something extraordinary is coming. My memoir, The Hospitality Leader's Roadmap, Move from Ordinary to Extraordinary, launches on October 15th on Amazon. This book shares my journey from a 15-year-old line cook to seasoned leader in the hospitality industry, packed with insights on leadership, resilience, and transformation. Whether you're an aspiring leader or a seasoned professional, you'll find practical wisdom and inspiration to elevate your career. Mark your calendars, and remember, 10% of sales from October 15th until the end of 2024 will benefit Chow. Grab your copy on Amazon.com on Tuesday, October 15th. 94% of consumers purchasing non-alcoholic beverages in restaurants are also purchasing alcohol. Dana Bonelli has worked in the wine and spirits industry since 2003, having held national leadership roles for 2 major U.S. importers, as well as executive-level distribution roles. She currently works as a portfolio director for the Wine Company of Minnesota, a family-owned wholesaler of fine wine, craft spirits, and most recently, adult non-alcohol products. She is passionate about the bourgeoning NA space and approaches her work and messaging to the on-premise trade around the philosophy and value proposition of inclusive hospitality. In this episode, we will cover topics such as the evolution of inclusive hospitality over the last 20 years, the different drink categories in the non-alcohol space, best practices on how to start your own NA program at your restaurant, the watch-outs for kids ordering non-alcoholic drinks, and share some of our favorite brands in the space today. Welcome to the No Hesitations podcast, the show where restaurant leaders learn tools, tactics, and habits from the world's greatest operators. I'm your host, Kristen Marvin, with Solutions by Kristen. I've spent the last 2 decades in the restaurant industry and now partner with restaurant owners to develop their leaders and scale their businesses without wasting time and energy so they can achieve work-life balance and make more money. You can now engage with me on the show and share topics you'd like to hear about, leadership lessons you want to learn, and any feedback that you have. Simply click the link at the top of the show notes, and I'll give you a shout out on a future episode. Thanks so much for listening, and I look forward to connecting. Hi, Dana. Thank you so much for being here. Super excited to have you on the show today.
Hey, Kristen.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm so good. Thanks. I love in your bio, you talk about the concept of inclusive hospitality. Would you say a little bit more about what you mean by that and how the NA space is having an impact on creating a more inclusive environment for restaurant guests and staff?
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about this topic, which I think is so prescient right now in the space of hospitality and its collision, whether by accident or intentionally, with the NA space, which is, as we know, just growing by leaps and bounds right now and sort of blowing up, if you will. My origin story is like going all the way back to being a teenager working in restaurants. It's a long time ago now, but I learned about the hospitality industry long before I went into the world of drinks and working in the distribution world. And at its core, hospitality is, I think, pretty intrinsic for us as human beings. It's just this very, sort of innate concept that we look to be friendly. We look to be genuine and authentic towards a stranger when we welcome them into whether it's our home or our place of business, right? So this isn't complicated, and hospitality can take different shapes and forms depending on the cultural and history of that cultural implications and history of that culture. But at its core, worldwide, it is pretty basic. It's just the idea that you're creating a very generous, sort of receptive environment for people who don't necessarily know each other immediately when they come into a public space. So we got that, right? Everybody understands that, so I don't want to over-explain it. But when we bring in the idea of inclusivity into and marry it with the word hospitality. I think that there might be a little bit of a tendency right now to overcomplicate that, when in fact it's also just sort of taking the idea of hospitality into more of a hyperbolic state, right? And when we hyphenate, or we add the word inclusivity or inclusive hospitality and put the two together, it's just the idea that you would go above and beyond your normal way of being hospitable to your customer or your guest, by making sure that you are kind of covering all of these bases, that does not exclude any one individual when you welcome them in. And this can mean so many things. You're probably already, as a restaurant operator, doing diligence around this when it comes to making sure that an elderly person is comfortable crossing the threshold of your establishment, or a person with any type of needs, that they're going to be met. And so when we talk about the non-alcoholic space, it's an opportunity for us to be inclusive when we set the table, literally, for our guests. And so, it's doing diligence around that, and really ultimately kind of doing a core values exercise as a business owner around what not only hospitality means to you and your team, but what the idea of making it totally inclusive could also mean.
Love it. So you've been in the game for a while. Take us back to 2003 and your start in the wine and spirits industry. How have you seen inclusivity and hospitality change over those years?
Oh, wow. Okay. That's a good question. And my story in hospitality actually goes back into the mid 90s. So being a teenager, working in restaurants, but to formalize my career, it is about 20 years old now. It's scary, but if we're going back to circa 2003, there just really wasn't much in the way of a broad lens in and around this conversation, which is not to say that people were not well-intended. I think people were living the way they were living back then. But the wine and spirits business back then was certainly not turning an eye towards, broadening an offering for people outside of, the sort of formal historical categories. Even when it comes to back then, when it came to learning about wine, for example, it was sort of a category that was shrouded in secrecy, very institutionalized, very much an old boys club. You really had to approach it academically and attack it from a textbook, you had to have literal books, to learn about it. And then you had to surround yourself by this, sort of esoteric, ivory tower group of elders who could, teach you the way. And that's how I came up in the industry, honestly. I came up in the industry learning about wine and then later spirits, by just gaining access to, a small group of people who had the knowledge that I sought to be transferred to me, right? And so, of course, all of this changed with the advent of the iPhone and our ability to have a supercomputer on our person at all times. But in the olden days, it was an old boys club, and you had to learn on the job, and you had to surround yourself with a sort of an elite group of people who had that information and the power to transfer that information.
And you had to be accepted, right? You had to be accepted. And
I just want to say that, that group, and look, there are many people in that group, in my experience, who were very generous with me with their time and their knowledge, but ultimately it was a real patriarchal pool I decided to dive into. And it is what it is. But, fortunately that has changed. It has evolved. There, inside of the industry, there's a lot more equity from a gender standpoint, I would say. It's been a slow climb for that all being said, it is completely different for young people coming into the industry now.
Yeah, so it's really impacted everybody in the industry, right? It's impacted the products that are that are offered from the suppliers to restaurants, both, and on premise and off premise. There's been this huge shift that's happening now, and some people keep asking me, "Is NA a trend?" And I say, no, it's not a trend; it's a movement. Like, this is here to stay. So get on board. This isn't something that's going to be hot for a couple months and then fade out. When did you? And so now you're in charge of building this, massive NA portfolio for your business. When did you start to see that shift happen and realize that NA was a category and an area that you really wanted to put your time and focus into?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's hard for me to really pinpoint the exact, there certainly wasn't like a aha moment that I had personally, or that, someone brought me all of this great data that I was able to make a data-driven decision around. I really started paying attention to the NA space, I would say, in the second half of 2021. So, we're in the second, more or less, full calendar year of COVID. I think there were some early inklings, not inside the industry per se, but just a groundswell of, people in the US and culturally, where people were starting to sort of question their relationship with alcohol. After look, we all know there was a lot of heavy drinking going on during 2020 and into 2021, and the industry data substantiates, those consumption trends having grown substantially during that period of time. We won't get into why that happened today, but that all being said, it was a pretty good time to be a retailer in the alcohol industry those years. So late 21, I started paying attention. I was starting to see beverages on the market that I wasn't able to sort of put in a tidy, sort of neat existing bucket categorically. Things like functional beverages were starting to catch my eye. Drinks that were geared towards, perhaps my demographic, like a middle-aged woman, who was interested in consuming less sugar on the day-to-day. More transparency in labeling, and then certainly a bit of a sea change. I was starting to see that time just moving in the conversation around health and wellness, and then, ultimately mental health. So big picture, I was starting to pick up on that. I'm certainly a target demographic for all of the wellness products that exist in the world.
Same.
And my Instagram feed is, my phone's listening to me right now. It's chock full of all the goopy things and all of the woo things that money can buy. And so, just as a consumer outside of my work in the drink space, I was the target audience for that. So, okay, my paying attention, probably was accelerated by the ads that I was being targeted by on social media. But yeah, there was a lot happening. There'd certainly been a good body of work in the on-trade, in the mixology community, in and around doing R&D behind the bar and not outsourcing that. And so lots of talented people were starting to work independently in the on-premise space, certainly in my market, developing the parts of the whole or the builds of ultimately what would become a non-alcoholic cocktail or, a full strength cocktail. But those sometimes adaptogenic ingredients were being siloed and understood. And we were starting to develop a nomenclature around what are these plants? What do they do for the body? Mm-hmm. How do we ingest them? And then ultimately, how could they wind up in a drink, in a liquid form, right? Yeah. So getting outside of the health and wellness space and into the on-premise trade, and then ultimately retail. Of course, the advent and insurgence of ready to drink also, I think, has propelled the idea that not only can we package these goods to consumers but that a home bartender, whether they're making, again, a non-alcoholic cocktail or full-strength cocktail with alcohol, could also incorporate some of these new ingredients, often plant-based, into their palette of ingredients. So looking ahead, we really got formally into the game in 2022 and started to put some intention behind not only bringing products to market, but starting to lead a conversation inside the trade in and around the idea that there were, it's simple, two things that we could affect the bottom line of our customers by being consultative to them in their beverage programs and highlighting the opportunity around non-alcoholic beverages and products.
Yeah.
But also to ultimately widen the lens on this notion of inclusion and hospitality for that literal table setting for their guest.
I love it. I want to talk about, spend some time talking about the value proposition here, but I'd like to go back to the functional beverage category, because and I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about what a functional beverage is, and then the rest of the categories that are in the non-alcoholic space, because there's many, many of them.
Yeah. I mean, a functional beverage at its core, it's pretty simple. It's just, it's a drink that is designed to have a specific health benefit to its consumer. Many of us already are consuming functional beverages unknowingly. So an energy drink, I mean, that's kind of the OG of the functional beverage world. I'm not going to name names, but I'm sure we can all think of one. It has an animal on the label. We used to mix it with vodka. My
husband might work for the company. Yeah.
Yeah. We used to mix it with vodka in the year 2000. If you were, happened to be
or Jägermeister in my face.
23 years old when that was happening, like I was.
Totally.
So, so energy drinks for sure, and by proxy, sports drinks, like Gatorade is a functional beverage. Because like we're trying to affect a health outcome by consuming an electrolyte-based beverage, right? So anything that's going to help your health, help you out, help you, whatever cures what ails you, kind of thing. But as we've kind of gone into like the 2 and 3.0 mode on functional beverages, we're going above and beyond now. We're talking about adaptogenic beverages, and those are just drinks that have components that would help the nervous system regulate, help us manage stress. There are other functional beverages on the market now that would help us, for example, create a mood or a sense of like a vibe, right? When we're not drinking. And so, there's a lot out there that, has come online even in the last year, in the NA space that would help, I don't want to use the word help, but like, give the consumer the opportunity, in their evening to, instead of choosing alcohol, which is, as we know, a depressant, choose a mood lifting drink, that doesn't have alcohol, but still gives us, the ritual around the way we consume alcohol, and potentially like ease social tension or give you a little bit of energy or lift, etc.
Hi everybody. We're taking a quick break to offer you an exciting opportunity. If you're a restaurant owner or manager looking to enhance your leadership skills, I invite you to join my 12-day leadership challenge. In just 12 days, you'll receive a guided packet with actionable strategies to transform your leadership in less than 5 minutes a day. Join the challenge and the community and grab your copy at kristenmarvin.com/12 days. Now let's get back to the show.
Howdy, listener. Are you also a podcaster seeking to stand out in the crowded audio landscape? I'm here to help. L. Connor Voice, LLC offers top-tier audio engineering, meticulous content management, and more, all tailored to save you time and elevate your podcast to new heights of professionalism. With L. Connor Voice, you can focus on what you do best, creating captivating content, while I handle the rest. Say goodbye to hours spent tweaking audio levels and managing uploads. I ensure your podcast shines with polished sound quality and seamless delivery. Ready to take your podcast to the next level? Contact L. Connor Voice, LLC today and make producing your podcast as easy as hitting record. For more information, go to lconnorvoice.com. Links are in the episode notes.
Other OG functional beverages would include like herbal tea. It's a big category, and we've been consuming these beverages for a long time. But again, just without attaching like jargon, right?
Yeah.
So sorry, you had a second question for me.
Yeah. Would you talk about the other categories beyond functional beverages in the non-alcoholic space?
Yeah, so this is interesting because I think it's a very easy and sort of normal tendency for us to just sort of think of non-alc or NA, but what does it mean, right? And it's awesome that we have now subcategories that we want to divide and conquer across, because it used to be that we could check a box certainly as a distributor or a restaurant owner by saying, yes, we have an NA offering, and that includes soft drinks and, a dusty bottle of non-alcoholic beer that we keep not even cold. Yeah. And there are two people that work at the restaurant who could put their hands on it, right? Yeah. Okay, so that's the olden days. The future, and this will change like literally by the time you timestamp this podcast. 100%. The future is like that there's all kinds of cool and amazing stuff going on. So we just talked about functional beverages. They are technically a subcategory inside of like the big NA bucket, right? You have ready to drinks. So sometimes that ready to drink, if you live in the state of Minnesota like I do, could be cannabis or hemp derived based beverages. Legal here, will probably be legal elsewhere sooner than later, certainly in states that allow the sale of cannabis and marijuana. You've got ready to drinks also that are technically what we would call cocktail cognates, or being direct analogs to a cocktail. One of the most famous out there, the one that created sort of the ready-to-drink non-alcoholic cocktail phenomenon, St. Augustus Phony Negroni,
my favorite,
is a perfect example of a product that was built for restaurants, single serve, zero waste, and a straight up a dupe for the real thing. Many people actually can't tell if this particular ready-to-drink cocktail cognate is a non-alcoholic drink. So that's a lot of words. All that being said, it's a beautiful subcategory that now exists. So I refer to it as a cocktail cognate, but we're still now in the ready-to-drink world, if that makes sense. Then you have, of course, de-alcoholized wine. So you know what this is. It's just like de-alcoholized beer. It started out as a regular wine, and then through the magic of reverse osmosis had the alcohol spun out of it and nets down to 0.5 typically, although some of them are now 0.0. And then you have this sort of big ubiquitous group called wine alternatives. And wine alternatives are gaining momentum as options for people who don't want a de-alcoholized wine for whatever reason, but they still want to enjoy the ritual of wine. They want to enjoy fruit, acid, and tannin, ultimately an adult beverage with food. So that's a big spectrum. Again,
yeah.
If we were having this conversation 6 months from now, I would probably be forgetting something. So just to recap, you've got ready to drinks. Some of them are cocktail cognates. Some of them are more in the soft drink world. Some of them have the addition of THC derived from cannabis. We've got functional beverages. We have de-alcoholized wine and beer, and then we have what we would call wine alternatives.
So there's really something for everyone here. I love, when you were talking about the functional beverages, I was immediately thinking this is a perfect opportunity for people to offer a functional beverage during the daytime, right? Breakfast, right. Lunch service, coming from a restaurant perspective. It's a huge industry, right? It's one of the top booming trends of 2024. Nikki Sani, owner of Groovy, just posted a link this morning on LinkedIn, releasing some stats around how big the industry is so far in 2024. And this is as of the end of July. The industry is at $423 million. So if the rest of the year tracks pretty big, it's reaching close to $1 billion, which is incredible, right? There's so much opportunity here.
Yeah, and again, with the caveat that we're talking about, and I'm not trying to be hung up on jargon, but we're talking about the adult non-alcohol space. So this would exclude the classic categories of soft drinks. Like this is not a Diet Mountain Dew conversation.
Yeah, correct. Right. And so he was surveying, really looking at data for his brands, right?
Yeah.
The non-alcoholic beer, which is really the force driving the market here. And then non-alcoholic cocktails and wine, or not cocktails, but wine that they offer as well. Talk a little bit about when you're in this consultative, I can't say the word, when you're consulting with restaurants, what is the value add for them? And I'd love to hear how it's being received. Are they coming in arms wide open here? Are they saying, I'll make it ourselves, don't worry about it, we don't want your product? Or is there pushback here? So what's the value add for restaurants?
Yeah, I mean, let's go back to the data. If we're business people who are just being data driven, and my job is to make data driven decisions like any business leader, right? We're collectively working in a space, to your point, of nearing $1 billion in the United States. So there's a lot of money on the table. There's a lot of revenue and profitability that can impact anybody's bottom line if they want to dip their toe in the water. Another amazing data point, to kind of substantiate, like, why is this happening? I love this stat. This is from our friends at the Adult Non-Alcoholic Beverage Association, the ANBA. They've got a great website if you haven't checked it out. But they've come to the table at the end of the first quarter, citing like the audience and defining the audience around these products. So obviously, people are spending a lot of money on this. So who are these people? Mm-hmm. It turns out that it's everyone, because they were able to collate this data and tell us that 94% of consumers who are purchasing in the adult NA space, apropos to our conversation today, 94% of those consumers also consume/buy alcohol. So that's pretty much everybody. Every human being with a bank account is buying inside this space. Probably many of them have long histories of buying products inside of this space. So I just want to put that data out there because, it's compelling. It's something to pay attention to if you're not already. In our role as a distributor, again, we've made the decision that we want to be leaders in this space. We want to be the people out in front of educating around the category. It does require a lot of diligence and education because we still see, despite the fact that, again, I'm in Minnesota, which is ground zero for the THC beverage space, which is on fire. It is going to be a $400 million category in the state of Minnesota this year. So just to say, like, the door has been kicked wide open on the NA beverage conversation generally. But that all being said, adult NA writ large, we still find that we have to have sort of the origin value proposition conversation with most of our customers. We work with about 500 to 600. It varies every year because of opening and closing in the on-premise space. But we work with, call it, about 500 restaurants in the state of Minnesota. Many of them are just bars too. And I would say that 70% of the time, we are not only the first distributor to come in with a compact offering that covers all of the subcategories, but we're also the first distributor that wants to take the time to have the conversation around, one, the value proposition on this space, and two, And that would include a conversation around hospitality and the concept of inclusive hospitality, but to the bottom line impact to that restaurant. It is one at a time that we turn them. And most of our customers who get on board and decide to dip their toe in the water later thank us for bringing them products that are pretty risk-free, often single serve, so that there's no worry about waste or dumping product down the drain. But yeah, generally, Kristen, we are still kind of doing the heavy lift with the trade.
So Dana, I want to go back to something really quick that you mentioned. You said this isn't just a Gen Z thing. Everyone is drinking non-alc.
Yeah.
And I have some friends that have said, you know what, when I go out, I like to start with an NA beverage, and then maybe I'll go into some alcohol with dinner. Are you seeing that in your region?
We for sure are. Again, there's a bigger conversation, I think, happening societally around moderation and mindfulness with alcohol consumption. And adult NA beverages are the perfect, gateway for people to do what you're describing. They're actually technically being called switchers.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Which I think is cute. Okay, so let's just call switchers. But yeah, the switcher is a real customer. The switcher is the person who, for whatever reason, maybe choosing to drink less, maybe choosing not to drink. Maybe they are a switcher Monday through Friday, and on Saturday they like to drink, and then on Sunday they don't drink at all. Okay, so let's just talk about that consumer. So when we have them sitting at our table in our restaurant or our bar, the goal is it's the same. We want to upsell, let's sell dessert, let's sell herbal tea, let's sell dessert wine, let's sell an aperitif, let's get as many beverages on the table as possible across the course of their dining experience. So why then would we not serve the needs of the switcher? Right? And also allow them to feel like they are adults out at night spending money in a restaurant, and not, having the sort of meager choices of club soda with lime or a tonic that has a garnish in it, which can be beautiful, don't get me wrong. But that those sort of staples of the NA list that are, what I kind of think of as the equivalent of being a vegetarian in the 90s. And, lucky you, everyone else is having a steak or lobster at the table, and your option is a veggie burger. And so you've been sort of moved to the kids' table in that dining experience.
Yeah.
So yeah, back to that person who is moderating for whatever reason. We know, regardless of their demographic or their reasons, so from Gen Z all the way to the boomer, the common denominator for people sitting there spending money in your restaurant is that they want flavor, and they want a flavor experience that isn't going to disappoint them or subtract from their overall experience. So I put that out there for food for thought, especially given the enormous range of options that we now have. And then to, sort of come back to that value proposition conversation, we have done the math on our side, and often in our role as consultants to our customers, we want to demonstrate that the pour cost is actually more profitable on adult single serve NA products than alcohol. And alcohol has long been the profit center of most restaurants. And so the net is actually even better in adult NA than it is in the traditional alcohol profit and loss sheet.
That sounds a little scary for the alcohol industry.
Perhaps. But, at the end of the day, it's still super profitable.
Yeah.
So, and will continue to be the preponderance of the business, right?
Yeah. I mean, I am talking to clients that are seeing their liquor sales drop significantly.
Yeah.
3 to 4 to 5%, right? And having to pivot now, and this is new, something new that they've never had to deal with before. They're like, I've never, a couple operators I've spoken with have said, we've never had to market our bar program. How do we do this? What do we do differently? So I love that you are having success with this. And you mentioned some of the restaurants that you're working with are saying, they're coming back to you saying, thank you for this. What is contributing to the success of the NA program in the restaurant?
Yeah, so it starts with staff education. Typically, we like to spend time when we can, and this goes back to our basic fundamentals around training around alcohol. It is no different. It is in our role in supporting our customers. When we are doing training on our alcohol products, we are also simultaneously training on the value proposition of the adult non-alcoholic products that we're selling as well. And then, serving it up, if you will, as, a way to upsell the ticket and helping the bartender understand that it shouldn't be an afterthought, but it should be part of the presentation of the beverage program. So when you leave the list at the table, you're comfortable navigating a conversation around what is and then insert functional beverage. What is a phony Negroni? What is, how is de-alcoholized wine made? I didn't know that existed. So preparing that staff for those, difficult questions, honestly. They're second nature to us around alcohol, but not so much, not quite yet, around the non-alcoholic offerings.
Such an opportunity to educate and offer additional hospitality and create a different memorable experience for somebody, which is so cool. Now, we talked about something pretty interesting last time. This is on, family of four sits down at the table. There's a non-alcohol category on the menu. Johnny, 8-year-old, orders a phony Negroni. What do you do?
Yeah, what do you do? This is a tough one. It's a tough one for parents, and it's a tough one for restaurant owners. I will say that while I am not a lawyer and I'm not giving legal advice here, I do recommend if you are a restaurant owner that you check with your local laws, which are often dictated at a municipal level around the service of adult non-alcoholic products. Case in point, NA beer, it's been around for a very long time, and it really gives us good, it's a good guidepost for everything else. Okay. So, this raises the conversation, how are you marketing your adult non-alcohol products on your menu? So it of course depends on your restaurant concept, because not every restaurant has a standalone drink list. Sometimes that drink list is, if it's a really casual restaurant, just wrapped into the food menu. It doesn't take up a lot of real estate on that document. But if you are an establishment who has a proper beverage program, and you have a cocktail list and you have a wine by the glass list, my recommendation is that you segment the adult non-alcoholic offering on that list, which is going to be handed to the adults at the table versus the non-adults. Okay. So that's one sort of protective measure, because there are laws out there that say you cannot sell a non-alcoholic beer to a person under the age of 18. It's not true everywhere. This is always at the state and then city level. So you do need to do diligence on that. If you have questions, you can contact local lawmakers and or your insurance company, because they will be able to give you very clear information about that. But yeah, my recommendation is to pull it into the list that you would give to the person who is old enough to buy alcohol in the first place at that table. I don't think most operators would want to see a 12-year-old literally sitting at a bar drinking a non-alcoholic beer. But again, it's a personal decision for the business owner. Other tips, many of the most progressive lists out there are showing the net ABV next to the beverage. So whether that is a Manhattan or a Phony Negroni, they're going to show that net ABV, and then they mix it all together so that when I'm ordering my Phony Negroni and it's sitting next to the Manhattan or the Old Fashioned, I'm also feeling included when I point at the list and order my 0 alcohol cocktail, but that everyone has full clarity on which ride they're getting on, if you will.
Yeah.
Then of course we all know there's a big trend inside of the slow and low ABV categories as well. And so if that's part of your beverage program and you're trying to position a lower ABV cocktail, it only stands to reason that you would traverse from 0 all the way to the highest proof or highest ABV cocktail on that list. Mm-hmm. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. No, and I love the point that you made about, again, inclusivity of where you're placing those NAs on the menu, right? Because I think it can be a little uncomfortable for people that are not ready to start, telling their friends or family or coworkers or whoever they're dining with, hey, I'm not drinking. And so when they look to maybe the bottom right corner of the menu, they're kind of pointing in that direction of like, here are where my options are. But if it's just included in the normal categories, then, it's so much more comfortable, I think. So there's so many options available, and I really appreciate your insight and taking the time to educate the audience on all the different categories and everything that's available to them. But this is a huge category. Again, I think it's going to be something that's with us for a long time. For restaurants, again, the ones that you've seen success with, and if a restaurant is listening to this show and they're really curious about starting an NA program, what would you suggest they do? Like, where are they going to get the best bang for their buck out of the gate?
So, I always like to recommend that people sort of walk before they run. Do some research in your home market. I always think it's interesting to R&D with your competitors, but also with your peers, right? So take a look. If there's a particular restaurant in your market, or even nationally, most restaurants have their lists online. Do a little research. Go out, go experience a meal in someone else's establishment, someone you respect, and see how they're doing it, especially if they've been highlighted as a leader in this space. So, good old fashioned R&D is a great place to start. But yeah, the walk before you run piece, you don't need to throw the kitchen sink at this right away. Dip a toe in the water across the subcategories so that you have representation. I would recommend having, if you don't already, put a non-alcoholic beer of quality on your list. NA beer is amazing now that there are so many quality options. Many local breweries in your hometown probably are bringing something to market that is truly excellent. You could probably put it on draft and have it ice cold, which is where it tastes the best. So check that out. Like, challenge yourself a little bit to go outside of the commoditized products, which are also excellent. I'm a huge fan of Guinness. I'm a huge fan of Stella. They are very good products. But if supporting local is important to you, do check out your backyard on the microbrewery scene, to see if there's something great, because you might be able to support, a business in your neighborhood by doing that. So, check that beer box, put some intention behind it. Next, find a great de-alcoholized wine. Take a look and try to find something that comes in a single serve format, like a 200 milliliter, because then your risk is way reduced. You're not going to open that bottle of sparkling NA and then watch, the bartender 3 days later dump it out because it's lost carbonation. So, walk before you run there, but find something that, hits your pour cost model in that space, but is well done. And again, there are great options out there. My pro tip here is that the sparkling de-alcoholized wines tend to be, in my opinion, the best on the market. I really favor Prima Pave. It comes in a 200 ml. But check that out. De-alcoholized wine can be great. They're dry. And again, the sparkling versions tend to mask the flaws that are a little easier to detect with still versions. So do look at that. And then find yourself a cocktail cognate. I think I've given the plug for St. Agrestis Phony Negroni now 4 times, but it really is that good, and you really cannot go wrong by putting this product on your list. That being said, it is a bitter drink, and not all human beings are attracted to a bitter flavor profile. So it can be a little polarizing. People either love it or it's just not for them. But it's a great option. Wine alternatives, there's a lot of great single serves out there. Proxies has cans. They're marvelous. And again, at the risk of sounding like an old industry guard person, if it's cold, it's sold, and it's sold once you bring that can to the table and pour it into an elegant glass next to the can, if that's how you want to serve it. So I would look at that. Above and beyond that, if doing some R&D is important, or you have a more progressive list, then I would suggest you want to move into some house-made options, again, that are lower in sugar. And then also take a look at the functional beverage space. There's a lot of cool stuff on the market. 3 Spirit is beautiful. Curious Elixirs, which is really marketed to the on-premise segment, has some really beautiful options. Many of these products are being served at the best restaurants in the U.S. at this point. So they've been vetted by the SOM community. They've been vetted by some of the most discerning chefs. So even looking at some of those lists, what is the French Laundry doing? What is 11 Madison Park doing? Because they have all had to go down this rabbit hole and serve the most discerning customers. So yeah, that's my tip in terms of research. If you can hitch your wagon to a distributor that can help guide you, like the wine company, that's also a huge benefit too, because if you trust that distributor and they've got the expertise to, you could outsource this list to them. That's another resource that you should consider.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you. Craft beer is really driving the market right now in the NA space, which is awesome. And there's so many delicious offerings out there. Yeah. I love the sparkling, the single service. It's so great. It's so smart for restaurants. I'll put all the links to everything that Dana just mentioned in the show too, so you can quick reference those. Dana, how can people get a hold of you if they want to learn more and if they want to work with you?
So we just serviced the state of Minnesota, Kristen. So unfortunately, I'm not able to affect anyone's business outside of the state of Minnesota at the distribution level. I can be reached at dana@thewinecompany.net. So dana@thewinecompany.net. So if you're in Minnesota, we're here to help. Outside of Minnesota, just at a consulting level, I'm always happy to talk shop with industry peers and help guide other distributors who want to invest in this space and share, what we've learned so far. We've certainly made some mistakes already. We've also had some just tremendous successes. That being said, I encourage, whether you're a restaurant operator and owner, or you're running a beverage program, or you're on the distribution side, to take a very serious look at this space. Come on in, the water's warm. We're going to be doing this from here on out. I don't think that this is a passing fad or a trend that will be punctuated by 2024 or 2025. 10 years from now, this will be the new normal. And for those of us who are invested early and doing the pioneer work, so far all I have to say is I'm here to testify that it is gratifying work. It is not a heavy lift, so don't fear it. There's a lot of opportunity, and I feel just a tremendous tailwind as we move further into the government space.
Yeah, I love it. Dana, thanks for all the work that you're doing in the space and for the industry. It's just incredible. Thanks again for being here today, taking the time to work with me, not once, but twice. really appreciate that. I'm glad we were able to get all of our tech stuff figured out this time. So we'll stay connected and talk to you very soon. That's going to do it for us this week, everybody. Please share this show with anyone in the restaurant industry who could benefit, and we will talk to you next week.